Welcome back to the channel, and today I am really excited because I have wanted to make today's video for a very long time. Pachamama. Thousands of people used the Pachamama ceremony of October the 4th, 2019 in order to condemn Pope Francis as a heretic, to condemn him as an idolater, or to reject that Pope Francis is even the Pope, or to justify their dissent in many other ways. People justify being Eastern Orthodox, Protestant, ex-Catholic sedevacantist. Because of these things, it is very important to get to the truth of the matter. So before we start, I just want to make clear that I would never defend idolatry. Idolatry is a grave sin. If idolatry took place, I would absolutely condemn it. And I realize that it is difficult for people to change their mind on this topic because the idol worship narrative has been repeated so often, especially by public figures, that it has become a dogmatic fact for many. So when people try to propose something different, people do not really give you a fair chance to prove it, and they have a very dismissive attitude, and they do become defensive, because proving them wrong would mean that they are guilty of some serious sins. So if you believe that idol worship took place, all I ask from you is to sincerely hear me out and show humility. And if you do disagree with anything I say, then please let me know in the comments, and do not just say, "You are wrong," because that does not help anyone. Tell me why. Tell me your reasoning for why you think I am wrong. And now, with that out of the way, let's start the video. The first time I heard about this Pachamama affair was in November 2020 when I was still a Protestant, so I looked at this whole drama from the outside. I had no reason to defend the Vatican at this time. I copy pasted the claim from Wikipedia I read, and I asked my Catholic friend, "Have you heard about this?" And he replied, "Of course I have. It was quite the news then." And I replied, "How could he do that though?" And then he sent me a couple of links to read, and then I realized that, okay, there isn't actually evidence that idol worship took place. I cannot use this as evidence against Pope Francis or the Catholic Church. And that was my view about the whole Pachamama affair when I was still a Protestant and did not care about defending the Catholic Church or the Pope. Now let's start at the very beginning. The Amazonian Synod in 2019 was convened to help the Amazonian people in terms of their living standards and the Amazon region itself, for big corporations not to exploit the natural resources, and how to help Catholics who live in this region. And they also talked about having more missionaries and evangelizing the Amazon, things like that. And when we speak about the indigenous people, the Amazonian people, this includes Catholics, Pentecostals, Charismatics, Evangelicals, and non Christians. The Synod itself lasted 21 days, between the 6th and 27th of October 2019. 2 days before the Synod started, October the 4th, there was a tree planting ceremony at the Vatican Gardens, which was organized by other Catholic organizations like REPAM, the Global Catholic Climate Movement, and the Order of Friars Minor. It was actually not organized by the Vatican itself, but nevertheless, it was Catholics who organized it, and those who were present were also Catholic. There is no evidence to suggest that those people who took part in the ceremony were non-Catholics. So it was a ceremony organized by Catholics for Catholics, which should already make you a bit skeptical that Catholics plan for idolatry to take place. It was a prayer service for the Amazon and the people of the Amazon. At the prayer service, there was a blanket with many artifacts and symbols that represented the people of the Amazon. There were fruit, pottery, a canoe with an oar, a fishing net, birds, and many other items present. The two wooden statues of a naked pregnant woman were merely two among many other items on the blanket that represented the people of the Amazon. Throughout the garden, there were also images of people they considered to be martyrs in the Amazon region. Throughout the Synod itself, I was able to identify numerous of these people the indigenous Catholics consider to be martyrs for the Amazon. They are not canonized saints in the Catholic Church, except for Saint Oscar Romero. Based on a reading I did about them, some of these people might be more accurately described as martyrs than others. But from the various videos and images throughout the Synod, I was able to compile the following list of people they presented as martyrs. This is by no means an exhaustive list, you should be able to find others, but from the 14 individuals I was able to identify, 7 of them are Catholic priests, 3 are religious sisters, and 1 is a brother. Only 3 of the 14 names were lay people, and I do not know whether those 3 were Catholics or non-Catholics, but nevertheless, you can clearly see the Catholic influence and message behind all of this. In the beginning of the ceremony, a REPAM representative spoke about the Amazon being consecrated to Saint Francis. Then a priest started praying for the Amazon and its people by starting the prayer in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and he quotes from Saint Francis, since it was the feast day of Saint Francis, and to ask for Saint Francis to protect the people of the Amazon and the Amazon region itself, since he is the patron saint of the environment. Then a Franciscan friar introduces the group of indigenous people from the Amazon, and he mentioned that they brought artifacts that represent the people and the region. He said that they will perform an indigenous folk song that is about them arriving on a river, as it is about them traveling and arriving somewhere, which makes a lot of sense since they quite literally traveled from South America to Europe. So it is just a normal song, it is not religious, it is not pagan. Then they gathered in a circle around the blanket, which could be an indication that something deeper and more profound is happening, which is obviously okay. Cultures express themselves differently. Some people can even interpret kneeling to be disrespectful during the liturgy, for example, and think that you should instead stand. But cultures are different, people have different perspectives. The outer appearances are not part of God's natural law. These things are cultural and change. So them deciding to gather in a circle, dancing and singing a song, it is neutral. Many people enjoy dancing when praising God, today and in the past. Think of King David. So maybe that is what they did in a religious context, or maybe they are not even praising God, and it is just a normal folk song where they dance. We do not know which one it is, since the audio is too bad. But whatever it is, since everyone is Catholic and it is a Catholic event, the logical and charitable assumption is that it is consistent with the Catholic faith, especially since the indigenous Franciscan brother is present with them, singing and moving with them. He will know exactly what is happening, so it is obviously consistent with Catholicism unless proven otherwise. Afterwards, they begin to pray. The woman who leads the prayer is a Catholic, and she symbolically looks to heaven as she is praying, and the others follow her by looking up to heaven as well. A lot of Christians look to heaven when they pray to God. Jesus himself did exactly that in John 17, verse 1. At the end of the prayer, they prostrate. Some people accuse them of prostrating to the 2 wooden statues and that it is therefore idolatrous. But Catholics should know more than anyone else that outer appearances do not tell you what is happening in someone's heart. This sort of sinful, rash judgment is exactly what Protestants are guilty of when they accuse Catholics of idolatry. So even if this full prostration was intended for the 2 wooden statues, that does not mean that this is an act of worship given to God alone in their culture. You do not know their hearts to make that judgment. You cannot read someone's heart by judging them by their physical postures, whether it is standing, kneeling, bowing, or prostrating. Cultures are unique. People's personal views and intentions are unique, and you do not know their intentions, so it is really dangerous to make assumptions about what is happening in someone's heart. I cannot emphasize this enough. When they planted the tree later in the video, the one guy kneels and bows his head all the way down to the ground, in front of Pope Francis and a cardinal. Obviously, he is not worshipping Pope Francis and the cardinal as gods when he did that. This just further proves what I said. A full prostration does not mean that they are worshipping what is in front of them as gods. Another issue with this argument is that people just assume that the prostration was directed towards the two wooden statues. The assumption that it is directed towards the two statues is just as baseless as someone assuming that they are prostrating towards a smaller statue of a male, or some other random item on the blanket, like the canoe. There is no evidence for this. On the contrary, we just saw how they looked up to heaven while they prayed, and then they prostrated. A lot of people end their prayers with a full prostration. Think of Byzantine Catholics during Lent when they prayed the prayer of Saint Ephraim. So they ended their prayer, they directed towards God in heaven, meaning that the prostration is directed towards God in heaven. They looked to heaven when they prayed, not the wooden statues on the blanket. They prostrated towards God in heaven, and there happened to be items and other people in front of them. These are all very straightforward interpretations. These Catholics were faithful to Catholicism, unless proven otherwise. To state otherwise would mean that you are guilty of the sin of rash judgment, because quite frankly, you have no basis to argue that this is idolatrous, because you cannot possibly read their hearts, and there is nothing to suggest ill will in their intentions and actions. Then they approach Pope Francis to give him gifts. The first woman gives him a ring, which some people claim is a ducum ring, but assuming that is true, it ultimately signifies cultural belonging and fraternity. It is true that some people connected with liberation theology also uses that ring for different purposes afterwards, but any group can take a normal innocent symbol and then use it improperly. The normal assumption would be that a ring for these Catholics signify cultural belonging and not a movement Pope Francis has criticized. The woman then does the sign of the cross, so she is a Catholic. The second woman approaches Pope Francis with the statue of the pregnant woman. She bows in front of Pope Francis and does the sign of the cross, so she is also a Catholic. And on the video you can hear a woman saying, Nuestra Señora de la Amazonia, which means Our Lady of the Amazon, and then something else which is hard to make out since the audio is not very good, but then she says de la Iglesia, meaning of the church. So the statue was presented as Our Lady of the Amazon, something of the church. Then the third guy gives him another cultural necklace and does the sign of the cross. So he is also a Catholic. They are all Catholics. And then nothing new happens, which did not already happen, and then they leave. And as they leave, the lady who led the prayer does the sign of the cross again. After this, nothing happened that is relevant to the discussion. But after this event, people accused the ceremony of idolatry. Why? Because the Catholics at the ceremony dresses differently in their culture, and their cultural practices are foreign. Yeah, sorry, but that is not a good argument. Cultures are different. You saw the ceremony yourself, we watched it together. There is literally nothing to suggest paganism. It was rash judgment and evil suspicion that caused people to condemn the ceremony, but not the actual facts. Point towards anything in the video where you have a moral certainty that it is paganism. You won't be able to. Everything can be interpreted in a very straightforward Christian or cultural way without any hint of paganism. As Christians, we have to interpret the actions, thoughts, and words of our neighbors in the most favorable way possible. This is a basic Christian teaching according to the Catechism of the Catholic Church. And look, the interpretations I proposed so far is pretty straightforward. It is not like I am confused and uncertain, but I will give them the benefit of the doubt. You are morally obligated to give them the benefit of the doubt. But honestly, there should not even be a doubt, because the interpretations are very straightforward. Either way, please do not have evil suspicion and rashly judge people. These are serious sins. Now let's talk about the two statues that made the headlines. People started accusing the statues of a naked pregnant woman to be the Pachamama statue, an idol. Based on what? Any scholarly research and images that shows that the Amazonian people specifically even made idols of Pachamama in the first place? Any proof that such idols even look like a naked pregnant woman, as opposed to the traditional representation of Pachamama being represented as a big mountain? Nope, people just asserted that it is an idol without any evidence. People just claimed it and repeated it enough times to turn it into an unquestionable dogma. Everyone at the ceremony was Catholic, and they gave Pope Francis a statue they considered to be Our Lady of the Amazon, Mother Mary. After the ceremony took place, things became a bit more clear as to the origin of the statues. Rafael Tavares investigated the origin of the statues in question, and he contacted sources from REPAM. REPAM, by the way, stands for the Pan-Amazonian Ecclesial Network, and it consists of multiple Catholic organizations in South America who seeks to defend the Amazon from environmental destruction and to protect the human rights of the Amazonian people, and they helped to organize the Synod.
Rafael Tavares, ASI Digital editor-in-chief, investigated the origins of the statues from the organization called REPAM.
Investigating more deeper into the origins of the image, what I was told by sources from REPAM is that the image does not actually signify, or it's art, pure art. It doesn't have a pagan significance, neither a Christian significance, according to sources from REPAM. The story behind this statue is that an artist in Manaus, the capital of the Brazilian state of Amazonas, this artist, he crafted this image, and a member of the spirituality team organizing the events at Transpontina, they have found the image and started to take it from tribe to tribe, from places to places, and the Indians themselves started to call that image that you see Our Lady of the Amazon.
They said that the image is purely art. It actually has no pagan or Christian significance or intentions at all. It was created by an artist in Manaus, the capital of the Amazonas state in Brazil. A member of the spirituality team organizing the events at Transpontina, Rome, got the image and showed it to different indigenous communities, and they themselves started to call it Our Lady of the Amazon. This is what REPAM sources told Rafael Tavares. And by the way, the Archdiocese of Manaus in Brazil also references Our Lady of the Amazon on their website, so it is clearly a title used for Mother Mary in the Amazon region by Catholics. Father Fernando Lopez, a missionary priest who preaches the gospel in remote areas in the Amazon, also confirmed that his missionary group used this image for years and bought it at an artisan's market in Manaus, Brazil. He confirmed that there was no pagan ritual, and there is something wrong with us if we are scared by a pregnant woman. He said that the image represents life. At this point, it is clear that these are just cultural statues that were bought in Manaus, Brazil. Originally, it only represented life. It had no Christian or pagan significance, but then the indigenous Catholics themselves used this cultural image and applied it to Mother Mary. Father Roberto Carrasco Rojas, one of the event organizers, is another missionary who worked with the indigenous people in Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru.
One item in particular is very symbolic of the Amazon for the people.
This
figure is the Virgin Mary of the Amazon, Our Lady of the Amazon. It's a devotion that started in the indigenous communities. They carved in wood an image of a Blessed Mother who is pregnant. She is the Virgin Mary, and we have called her Our Lady of the Amazon.
He says that the statue is the Virgin Mary, Our Lady of the Amazon. When they carve a wooden statue of a pregnant woman or see one someone else made, they consider it to be the Virgin Mary. On the 16th of October 2019, Father Giacomo Costa, a communications official for the Synod, said that it is not the Virgin Mary. Who said it is the Virgin Mary? When told, many people have said the woman is a figure of the Virgin Mary. Costa added, many have said, okay, as you like, but I have never heard that. There is nothing to know. It is an indigenous woman who represents life. It is a feminine figure and is neither pagan nor sacred. Paolo Ruffini, prefect of the Vatican Communications Dicastery, speaking unofficially and not as the head of the Vatican's or Synod's communications, personally interpreted the image as follows. Fundamentally, it represents life, and enough, I believe, to try and see pagan symbols or to see evil. It is not. It represents life through a woman. And then on the 21st of October 2019, Paolo Ruffini again said that we have already repeated several times here that those statues represented life, fertility, Mother Earth. And when he says Mother Earth, he does not mean it in a pagan idolatrous way, he means it in a Christian way as God's creation sustaining us. Sister Mila Diaz Solano, a Dominican theologian from Peru, wrote the following. The statue of a woman with indigenous features, with the baby in her womb, is how they represented the fertility of the Amazon and the vulnerability of all Amazonian nations. This statue is not an idol. It does not exist in the Amazon as a goddess. It was a representation, a symbol. Catholics coming from the Amazon did not and do not worship them. You can see that people have different opinions, but how do we make sense of it all? Some people believe that the statue represents life and the Virgin Mary, while others say it represents life and does not comment on whether it represents the Virgin Mary, and others say that it only represents life and not the Virgin Mary. If you keep the background information of the statues in mind, as well as the beliefs of the indigenous Catholics, it makes perfect sense, and the answers are all very consistent. All of the opinions are actually correct. None of them is really wrong. Originally, these statues were just normal cultural images. So when people say that it is not an image of the Virgin Mary, technically that is true, so it only represents life. But at the same time, many indigenous Catholics themselves have appropriated an additional meaning to the statue, meaning that it is an image of the Virgin Mary. So for some Catholics it only represents life, but for other Catholics, particularly the indigenous Catholics, it represents life and the Virgin Mary. And notice that no one connected to the events thinks that it is an idol. On the contrary, that option is completely rebuked by everyone. The only question is whether it represents life or the Virgin Mary, and the answer ultimately is both, because those Catholics present at the ceremony presented that statue as the Virgin Mary. So for anyone to accuse them of idolatry is guilty of slander and bearing false witness. This is a pretty major point that you have to remember. There is no evidence that it is an idol, and it is an absolute certain fact that those indigenous Catholics at the ceremony believed that the statue is the Virgin Mary. We know that the artist did not make idols, he made cultural statues, and we have absolute certainty that these statues were not seen as idols by the Catholics, it was seen as the Virgin Mary. So how did idol worship take place when there is no evidence that it is even an idol? We know it is a cultural statue that they interpreted to be the Virgin Mary. So how did idol worship take place? This is a question that cannot be answered by those who believe in the idolatry narrative. Now, of course, some people will try to steer the conversation in a different direction by saying, okay, but what about Pope Francis? Why did Pope Francis call the statues Pachamama when they got stolen? Well, the same reason in the beginning of this video, I referred to the ceremony as the Pachamama Ceremony, because that is what it has been called by everyone else. You refer to it how other people call it. Granted, in this context, the Pope should not have referred to it as Pachamama in an attempt to refer to the statues in a way that the media will understand what the Pope meant. He inadvertently caused people to have a mistaken impression as to the real identity of the statues, and this was confirmed by the Vatican as a news outlet reported. Vatican spokesman Matteo Bruni said that the Pope used the word as a means to identify the statues because that is the way they have become known in the Italian media and not as a reference to the goddess. So it is unfortunate that the Pope followed the trend of the media to refer to it as Pachamama, but there is an explanation for it where it fits in perfectly with the rest of the facts we have already established in the video, and the Vatican cleared it up and refuted the wrong interpretation. So people should not bring this up as a counter-argument and try to ignore all of the other evidence. And by the way, in the same message of the 25th of October 2019, where Pope Francis called it by the name used in the media, he made clear that the statues were without idolatrous intentions. In other words, no idol worship took place. It is not an idol. It was not worshipped. And interestingly, a video taken in a church of Santa Maria in Transpontina, Rome, there is further evidence that the statue is not an idol. In the following video, you can see Catholics surrounding the statues on a blanket with other items, while praying the Hail Mary, Ave Maria.
Ave Maria, cheia de graça, o Senhor é convosco. Bendita sois vós.
Obviously, it would be quite bizarre to pray the Hail Mary with idols in the middle of their prayer circle. So this is more indirect evidence that people did not see it as an idol, which makes sense. They are Catholics. Catholics do not worship idols. That's the normal Christian and charitable assumption you have to make about your fellow Christians and not assume that they are idol worshippers. Also, consider this next piece of evidence as to the identity of the statues. REPAM posted a song about the Annunciation in December 2018 with the lyrics saying, "Hail full of grace, the Lord is with you. Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found grace before God, and you will conceive in your womb and give birth to a son, to whom you will give the name Jesus, Christmas in the Amazon." And guess what one of the images were in this song about Mother Mary? Yep, the Amazonians interpreted this exact statue as Mother Mary, as can be seen in a video at least 10 months before October 2019. It is not a pagan idol, it is Mother Mary for them. Some people will argue that they do not think that the wooden statues are appropriate representations of Mother Mary, but just keep in mind that there are medieval paintings of Mother Mary that are way more explicit and vivid in their imagery. These statues would not even be PG-13, but some medieval paintings would be like PG-18. And medieval paintings did not even reflect their culture. At least these statues reflect indigenous culture, so it is understandable. I am not a big fan of it either, but it is much better than some medieval paintings, and it is not too vivid. But for someone to claim that it is inappropriate is definitely not the same as arguing that it is a pagan idol. So whether it is appropriate or not is a completely different topic and not relevant at all. We are getting closer to the end of the video, and I want to discuss the concept of Pachamama. Pachamama is translated as Mother Earth. Obviously, Pachamama or Mother Earth can function in an idolatrous context. But the question is, do you think Pachamama or Mother Earth can be used in a Christian context? Well, actually, yes. Saint Francis of Assisi spoke about Mother Earth. Many Christians in the early church spoke about Mother Earth and the earth being a mother. People like Saint Basil the Great, Saint Augustine, Saint Ambrose of Milan, Eusebius, Tertullian, Saint John Chrysostom, and Saint Gregory Nazianzen. So Christians can speak about Mother Earth or Pachamama. The question is just how you understand that. If you give sacrifices for Mother Earth, or if you think Mother Earth is a deity, a goddess who is conscious, and you worship it as a goddess, then no, Obviously, this is wrong. You should not do that. But if you know that Mother Earth is an inanimate object, cannot hear you, does not love you, and is not a goddess, and you do not worship it as such and offer sacrifices, then that is consistent with Christianity. So even if you see Catholics mentioning Pachamama or Mother Earth, do not automatically condemn them as pagans and idolaters, because you do not know that person's intentions. Okay, maybe that person does have a flawed understanding and they should be rebuked. But first, you need that person to make their understanding public. Most likely, the person is consistent with the Catholic faith. It would be sinful to accuse people of idolatry if you do not have that moral certainty. Now, there is one last thing I want to discuss, which is not directly related to today's topic, but people still bring it up, so it is important to address. The Missio Foundation, a pastoral body formed by the Italian Bishops' Conference, published the following prayer in April 2019. Pachamama of these places, drink and eat this offering at will, so that this earth may be fruitful. Pachamama, good mother, be favorable, blah blah blah. The first time I heard about this, it confused me. People presented this as evidence that idol worship took place, and I just could not understand how Catholic bishops could pray this. If it was one or two people who engaged in idolatry, then okay. But an entire pastoral body? It just did not make sense, and it left me confused for a very long time. I withheld my judgment because I suspected that I might be missing something, because it just did not make any sense. It didn't challenge my position on the Vatican Cardinals ceremony, because this is a completely separate event, many months prior, and completely different people. Worst case scenario, those people who prayed this prayer would be guilty, but Pope Francis and those indigenous Catholics present at the ceremony are innocent. So I have been wondering, how am I supposed to interpret their intentions by praying this prayer? Are they using this prayer in a non-literal way, where they do not really think that Mother Earth can hear their prayers, and their intention is actually to ask God to bless the earth and use the earth as his instrument to sustain us? That makes sense, I guess. It does not contradict Catholicism if they know that the earth is just an inanimate object that cannot hear you, and that it is merely a creation of God, and your intention is actually to ask God to bless you through the earth, and you are not intending to worship the earth. That makes sense, but I do not think it is smart to pray this, because it is very easy for people to think that you are praying to a false goddess. However, as I prepared for today's video, I looked at this topic again and I found the original source. At the bottom it says, Prayer to Mother Earth of the Incan people. Now it made sense. I was looking at it all wrong. Yes, I can interpret it in a way where the bishops did not intend idolatry, but I did not realize that this is not even a prayer of the Catholic bishops in the first place. They did not come up with it. It is simply an Italian translation. As the Catholic Culture website explains, it is not a new composition, but a recent Italian translation of a prayer first published in Argentina in 2 scholarly works. The prayer appears in the indigenous original, etc. In other words, they are merely quoting the prayer without necessarily approving of it. They quote it in order to show you how these people think about and value the earth, to understand their culture and mindset. The publication is literally about understanding the Amazonian people and the dangers they face after all. The prayer was not approved and condoned as being Christian. Heck, it even specified that the prayer was to Mother Earth of the Incan people. Are you one of the Incan people who believe in their version of Mother Earth? No, so the logical assumption is that you should not pray it. If I quote a prayer to a Greek god and tell you that this prayer is to a Greek god, then you will obviously think, okay, so this means that I should not pray this prayer then. 2 other times in this publication, it also mentions a prayer without telling you the source of what those prayers are. The first one is a prayer by Pope Francis. The second one is a poem called A Gift, believed to be by Mahatma Gandhi. The bishops even end it with an Amen. showing their approval to what is written in the poem. And yet, in the prayer to Pachamama, they did not end it with an Amen, even though it is literally a prayer and not just a poem. This means that it lacks the very thing that would have meant that they approve of the prayer. This further reinforces the idea that they simply quoted the prayer without approving of it and encouraging other people to pray it. A casual reader would not have come to the conclusion that the bishops are guilty of idolatry, which is why it was only a long time afterwards that people went back to this and then accused them of idolatry. If idolatry was intended, many people would have made a big deal out of it in April already and not wait until October to go back to this and then read malicious intentions into it. Granted, I do not see the need to have quoted this prayer in the first place. They probably wanted to show what these people believe, how they value the earth, and include one of their prayers so they feel represented and acknowledged. But you can do that in other ways that are more effective. That is my opinion. But just because I think that they wasted space in their publication by quoting this, it does not mean that I think that they encouraged idolatry, especially when they tell you that the prayer is a prayer of the Incan people to Mother Earth, which would communicate to Christians that they should not pray it, since we are not part of the Incan people who believe in Mother Earth as they do. And they did not put an Amen at the end of the prayer like they did with the poem, which means that it lacks their explicit approval. Because of this, I do not believe it is justifiable to accuse them of idolatry. And with that, we end today's video. I will link some of the sources I used in today's video in the description. I hope that you see the events of October 2019 differently now. For me, it is abundantly clear that no Catholics engaged in or condoned any idolatry at the Vatican Gardens ceremony. The evidence proving their innocence is overwhelming, and there is no justifiable reason to believe otherwise. The sad thing is that a lot of people will still disagree and continue with the narrative that idol worship took place because it has been repeated so often over the years. It is deeply ingrained into people's minds, so it is very difficult to undo that. It takes sincerity and humility to be able to acknowledge that the facts say otherwise. If you still disagree with me after watching this video, let me know and tell me why based on the facts. At the very least, I hope that this video creates a level of doubt and uncertainty about the narrative you were made to accept over the years, and that as a result, you will at least withhold judgment and no longer condemn the event as sure idolatry. And over time, I pray that everyone will be able to outright condemn the idolatry narrative that is pushed by so many people online, because it damages the faith of Catholics and makes people leave the church. And of course, when people are guilty of the sins of rash judgment, bearing false witness, slander, schism, as is the case with the idolatry narrative with a lot of people, it puts souls at risk of eternal damnation. This is why it is so important to talk about this topic. Thank you for watching, God bless you, and have a wonderful Christmas season.